Good evening. It's so good to be with you. Always consider it an honor and a privilege to stand before you and pray. Something can be said tonight to encourage you and strengthen you in your faith. And again, appreciate all those that come together on Sunday night. You've been here this morning. Beautiful day, and you've come back tonight. It says so much about you, and appreciate so much your faith and its inspiration to me. Before we get started with the lesson, I want you to know we have a little thing called Starlight Academy. And coming up, and I go ahead and tell you the official name has been changed because this one's trademarked. It's going to be Starlight Bible Academy. So no real big difference, but logo looks the same. It'll just add the word Bible, and that'll distinguish us from other names similar to ours. But we are trying to get our own 501c3, and that'll be already in the works. But we'll inform you on some other things later. Our start date, October the 20th. First class. Got five classes, and we have 76 students. But here's where we need you. We need prayer warriors. If you can bow your head and you can utter a name, we need you. We've got 16 signed up to be prayer warriors. You can do this on the Light Post app. Martha Heimer's going to be in the back of the table, and she's got a clipboard, and there's a clipboard on the table there. If you can, after tonight, you want to sign up. But we really need you. Two things. Pray for that child every day. And on October 19th, come to the kickoff and meet your child and the parents. This is where the church connects to the school. Otherwise, we're just doing a Bible class, and they meet nobody from church, and they don't know someone supporting them and praying for them. So this is the big connector for us. So if you could please pray about your decision to be a prayer warrior. See Martha tonight, see me, one of the board members, and go to Light Post app. You can sign up, or you can go to the table in the back. That'll be a great, great help for us. I'm not a big traveler, and Jennifer is certainly not a big traveler. We've been talking about going out west. It's just a lot of traveling. And we're not real sure how to do that, but we may try to make that happen. But we've heard about Branson, Missouri, and thought, we go to Gatlinburg, but Branson's so far. It's 8 hours away. It's over 500 miles, But I was convinced. Bart and Sabrina Cagle mentioned about Sight and Sound Theater. Who has been to the Sight and Sound Theater in Branson, Missouri? Okay. All right. June has one person. You need to go there. It's a great, they do Bible stories. They did the story of David. It's phenomenal. They do such a great job. It's like a Hollywood production. They do the story of David. I think they're going to do it for 2 years. They do it every weekend during the week. I can't remember how many shows, hundreds of shows, 2,000-seat theater, and they sell them all out. So it's just that powerful. But anyway, that was the reason we went to Branson, Missouri, to make this trek. And we did it. We made a few wrong turns and a few stops along the way, but it was a great trip. But tonight I want us to talk about Moses and the wilderness journey. Now, granted, when me and Jennifer made this trip, very easy. I mean, we didn't have to go by foot. We went by car. I control my little 68-degree thermostat on my side. Jennifer 70 degree, and had a radio. Drove a nice car, nice cushioned seats. Not much of a journey. But I want you to think about, if you can imagine, what it was like to travel probably some 7,000 miles. They could have done the 300-mile trek, but we know how that went. They didn't quite do the straight route, so they wandered in the wilderness for 40 years, traveling 7,000 miles on foot. You can imagine the journey. We know how God protected them. He did not let their feet swell. He did not let their clothes wear out. But it was a journey nonetheless, and a difficult journey at that. There are 4 things I want us to look at tonight to help us to understand about that journey and help us to understand about our journey in life as well. First thing I want us to look at, the providence of God. I got the wrong thing here. What is providence? I ran across a little book. It's called The Will of God by Leslie Weatherhead. I would recommend you getting that. The Bible never really mentions the word providence, but we know the word providence is used quite often. Webster's Dictionary defines it as the divine guidance or care. preparing for the future. I like to see it as God's plan for us in our lives. Colossians 1:16 through 17 says, "For by him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things were created through him and for him." So we know Jesus Christ is the reason why we have life. And it's Jesus Christ who we want to live for. Daniel chapter 2, verse 21 says that God changes times and seasons, that he even sets up kings and removes kings. God is in control. Acts 17:26, Paul at Athens, he says, "And God made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling place." See, God has allotted time for you and allotted place for you while on this earth. Proverbs 16:9 says, "The heart of a man plans his way, but it's the Lord that establishes his steps." So what does that mean? Does that mean we have free moral choice? I think it means that God's going to guide us, but he's going to do that in conjunction with what we do in our life. We work together in life with God. It's the providence of God. Ephesians 1:11 says, "We have been predestined according to the purpose of him who works all things according to the counsel of his will." So being predestined does not mean that all of our life has been predetermined, but it does mean that God has laid out the blueprint for us and has asked us to follow it. And we are going to work on this blueprint together. However, in his omniscience, he already knows what choices we will make. And that's kind of what blows our mind a little bit. But we do have free moral choice, but God has a plan and wants us to follow his plan. But his plan is going to come to fruition regardless of what we do. Let's think about God's providence in evidence to the story of Moses. Genesis 15:13 and 14 says that God told Abraham that his descendants would be in slavery for 400 years, but God would deliver them with great possessions. We were foretold this. That's God's providence. Genesis 50:24 through 25. Joseph said before he died, "God will surely visit you and bring you out of this land." So again, he foretold what was going to happen in the future. That's God's providence. Exodus 3, verse 7 and 8, God told Moses at the burning bush he would deliver them out of the hands of the Egyptians. That's God's providence. So was it by chance that Moses got to the burning bush, or was it God's providence? Pharaoh saw the Israelites becoming stronger and a threat to him, so he ordered all the male babies to be killed at birth. Was it by chance that the midwives got there too late and allowed these babies to live? No, because we know they actually feared God, part of God's plan. After Pharaoh ordered all male babies to be thrown into the Nile River, was it by chance that maybe baby Moses was put in the basket in the bulrushes? I think not. I think it was God's providence. Was it by chance that Pharaoh's daughter rescued the baby from the Nile and raised it in Pharaoh's household? Was it by chance that Moses' mother was called to nurse him? Or just maybe it was a divine providence of God. As we think about providence, we must understand what is God's will. Is there purpose for everything, or is it that God's purpose will be found in everything? In May 27, 2002, there was a man by the name of Ike Brown. He was a police officer, 38 years. And his doorbell rang, 4:30 a.m. He opens the door and he sees his sergeant, his lieutenant, and his chaplain, and he knew this was not good. And they gave him the news that his 21-year-old son had been murdered. His father wanted revenge on this young man. They were at a party playing video games. A man came in wanting drugs from one of the friends. He shot two of the boys. One of them was Ike Brown's son. He really messed with them on really how he felt about this young man. But 3 years after that incident, he met him face to face. He says, I don't know what it was about that day. But he said, you know what? From that point, I never hated him. I never really wanted to seek revenge. Matter of fact, he said, I wanted to hug him. I wanted to forgive him. He began writing letters for the next several years to this young boy, Tekoya Kreiner. But that year 3 came, and he wrote this letter to him and said, you know, I miss my son. And I was wondering if you would be able to stand in for him and be my son. So a few weeks later, he got a letter from Tekoya. He was scared to open it, and he finally did. And he opened it, and this is what it said. Dear Mr. Brown, I now know that God is real. And I told God, if you forgive me and love me, I want to hear from you. And if I did, I would give my life to him. He went on to write saying that I am not qualified. But if you'll have me, I'll be your son. And you could be my dad. In 2009, Ike Brown adopted his son's killer, Tekoya Kreiner. Was it God's will for Ike Brown's son to be murdered? Absolutely not. Was it God's plan to bring Tekoya Kreiner to a better life? Absolutely. All goodness comes from God. All evil comes from Satan. Did God use this father's grief to bring redemption to his son's murderer? Absolutely. We know 2 Peter 3:9 says that God does not want anyone to perish, but wants everyone to come to repentance, even this young man. If we begin to argue about God's will, we must be consistent. So the prayers for Tekoya Kreiner to get off drugs, was it a prayer against God's will? If this had to happen. When Ike Brown's son was fighting for his life after the gunshot wound, was any prayer for his healing going against the wishes of God? We must know this. We are the ones who brought sin into this world. Evil must take its course. But always know that God hates evil and he wants nothing but good to happen to you. That's the plan of God. That's the purpose of God. That's the providence of God. God does not need evil to produce good. Evil does not make good qualities. It simply reveals them. Romans 12:1 says, not to be overcome by evil, but to overcome evil with good. So God will use evil to accomplish his good. That simply is the providence of God. Second thing we're going to look at is the calling of God. We are not comfortable saying, well, God has called me into to doing something, to go into the mission field or to start this ministry. You know, God did call Moses. He called Jonah. And he called Saul. He called many men we know in the Bible and women. Can God call you? Romans 8:29-30 says, for those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, in order that he might be the firstborn among many brothers. Of those whom he predestined, he also called, and those whom he called, he also justified, and those whom he justified, he also glorified. So who did God foreknow, meaning he knew before they came into being? We know Jeremiah 1:5 says that the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah, saying, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. And before you were born, I consecrated you. So did God know you and I before we were born? I believe he did. Therefore, he also predestined us according to this passage, as we've just discovered about God's providence. Therefore, according to Romans 8:30, God calls us. But if we have the providence of God, we ask again, what about our free moral choice? As we think about the calling of Moses, think about this. God's plan will not be deviated, but you can deviate from God's plan. God may call you to do something. You have a right not to answer it. So what does he do? He goes to find somebody else. If Moses did not answer that call at the burning bush, I believe he would have gotten somebody else. God's providence and plan is intact. Where you fit in that story is up to you. That is your calling. Are you going to answer the call? It's interesting that Moses himself was not prophesied to answer that call, but his role was. So how about us? If you ask Nathan and Matthew, who have accepted this commission to go to Alaska, and his soon-to-be bride, Eleanor, to go to Alaska. Nathan's already there. Matthew and Eleanor going in April. If you ask them, was it a calling from God? I think they'll tell you that's what God wants me to do. I think it is a calling from God, and we are called to do different things as well. 1 Corinthians 1:9 says, you were called into the fellowship of his Son. No doubt we were called to have a relationship with him. 2 Timothy 1:9, Paul says, God saved us and called us to a holy calling. The parable of the talents, they were called to invest their money using their abilities. It says the man entrusted his property with his servants. Anytime God asks something of us, he entrusts you with your talents and abilities, and we're called to do it. You know my story. A lot of you know my story. I was at Lipscomb, pre-engineering. I transferred to tech. It ate my lunch. I got out of engineering. It was not for me. That was not my calling. I do believe my calling was ministry. So 35 years ago, I took the job here and knew that's what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. Did God whisper in my ear? Did he send me on a mountain and had a conversation with me? No. But I believe in my study of the scriptures, in my life of prayer, my life of faith, I knew God was tugging at my heart to not be an engineer, to be a minister of the gospel. I feel it was a calling. James Christopher Harrison was 14 when he underwent major chest surgery that required the transfusion of a large amount of blood. He saw how that changed his life. So despite his fear of needles, he made it a mission in his life to give blood. He had something in his plasma that was going to help with this RH. He had an RHD antigen that was useful in preventing RH disease that affects newborn babies. And it was a rare blood that he had. And he became known as the man with the golden arm. He set the world record for giving blood 1,173 times. I passed out the first time I gave at Sycamore School in a bus. I don't know if I can give that many times. From 18 to 81, this man gave blood all his life. They have estimated that he saved 2.4 million babies. And you see some of the babies he saved in that picture. Was James Harrison called by God to do good? Well, it sure wasn't Satan. I believe it was called by God to do good, as we are called in life to do good. James 1:17 says, every good and perfect gift comes from above. Philippians 2:13 says, it is God who works in you to will and to work for his good pleasure. Ephesians 2:10 says, we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works. We're called to do good. Jesus himself answered the call and gave his own blood to save millions of people on the cross. When we were given a chance to do good, it is a calling from God. The question is, will we answer it? Moses was called by God from the burning bush. He said, take your sandals off, you're on holy ground. He was told to go to Egypt, tell Pharaoh to let my people go. He answered that call and changed the lives of millions of people. We have that same opportunity and calling to bring people from the bondage of sin to the freedom that can only be found through Jesus Christ. So as we look at the providence of God, as we look at the calling of God, now we can look at the test of God. This man was raised in poverty as a child. He had little formal education, even having to teach himself and borrow books from people so he can learn to read. At age 23, he tried to run a business and failed and had to pay that debt for years. He tried to run for state legislature, Congress, and Senate, and he lost all elections. He lost 2 of his children at young ages, and he struggled with depression. When he finally became president, the nation split apart. He bore the enormous weight of leading this country through the Civil War, and despite all these hardships, all these tests, he never gave up. Abraham Lincoln became the 16th president of the United States. He preserved the Union. He issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which paved the way for the abolition of slavery. So debt, death, depression, defeat. Abraham Lincoln was tested, but he passed the test. He not only survived it, but he thrived, becoming our 16th president. James 1:13 says that God tempts no one, but we do know God tests us as he tested Moses. You think about it this way. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil was a temptation of the devil, but a test from God. Abraham was tempted by the devil to take his only son, but Abraham was tested by God to prove his faith and continue his family legacy that brought us to Christ. Job lost his servants, his livestock, his home, even his 7 children. He was brought to his lowest point when his body was struck by bulls, and his wife told him to curse God and die. He was tempted by the devil to curse God, but he was tested by God to stay strong in his faith. Jesus was tempted by the devil when he was sentenced to die, but he was tested by God when he endured that death and resurrected the 3rd day. Going back to Moses, Deuteronomy 8:2-6 is Lawson read. You shall remember the whole way that the Lord your God has led you these 40 years in the wilderness, that he might humble you, testing you to know what was in your heart, whether you would keep his commandments or not. He humbled you and let your hunger and fed you with manna, which you did not know, nor did your fathers know, that he might make you know that a man does not live by bread alone, but lives by every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. You know, Moses was tempted by the devil to refuse the call, but it was a test from God to become a leader, and he accepted that call. He endured more tests when he began to speak to Pharaoh, and he says, I'm not eloquent in speech, and what if they don't believe me? Try to make excuses as Satan was tempting him not to answer this call. The Israelites were tested by plagues. You know, they were probably, when the water was turned to blood, they're thinking, you know, you're a God of living water, but you're making our water turn to blood. They suffered through the frogs and the lice, and we know the Israelites suffered those plagues. But what about the light? He took away their light and put them in darkness. But God's people, the Israelites, were given the light from God. They were tested. They were tried. And the final test was the lamb's blood. They were told to put on the doorpost, or their firstborn would have to die. They were made thirsty in the wilderness. They were made hungry, all as a test from God. God provided water from the rock and manna from heaven. James 1:2-3 says, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. We know the story of Joseph as he went through tests. Romans 8:28 says that all things work together for good to those who are called according to his purpose and those who love God. After Joseph endured all the suffering that he endured, he was sold into slavery. He was put in prison for things he did not do. And he told his brothers, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. You could turn your test into tragedy. You can turn your test into triumphs. It all depends on how you use it. Moses was tested, and Moses triumphed through it all. And the final thing we see tonight as we look at the wilderness journey is the deliverance of God. On our trip to Branson, we went to one of the shows. We got a lot of shows there. This was an illusionist. His name was Reza. One of his big acts was he's going to put this girl in a cage with a trap. She's going to lay on top with a trap door. They can go down, and big metal spikes underneath her. And he's in this other cage, and he's handcuffed. And he's got 60 seconds, to uncuff his hands and save this girl. And there's a rope tied between these two cages. And his cage is moving gradually away to tighten the rope, to pull the trap door, to release the young girl to her death. And as you know, in the nick of time, he undoes his handcuffs. And not only does he stop it in time, actually the door trap did go, the rope tightened and the trap door went open, but he got there in time and caught the girl before she fell on those metal spikes. Pretty intense, I'm going to tell you, pretty intense. But you think about that, those situations like that, you got seconds to make a decision. What if something goes wrong? You think about life, do we feel trapped sometimes? We feel like we're under pressure and we got to make the right decision at the right time, and pressure mounts up on us so much it just seems like our world is caving in. It gets intense. What if we make the right decision? Maybe we made the wrong decision. We feel like I just don't know how I'm going to get out of this situation. When Moses and the Israelites escaped from Egypt, being chased by the Egyptians, they came upon the Red Sea. They were trapped. The people began to say to Moses, why don't you just leave us to serve the Egyptians? You've left us to die in the wilderness. The people started to complain and just really blame Moses. What are you doing? And Moses said this to the people. He said, fear not, stand firm, see the salvation of the Lord. The word salvation means deliverance. Moses knew God was going to deliver them from this trap. He just had to convince the people that God was going to provide a way. He is the God of salvation. And he said this, he said, which he will work for you today, talking to the Israelites. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you have only to be silent. Salvation means deliverance. Moses knew that God was fixing to deliver them. So he took his staff in his hand and he raised it above the Red Sea, and it parted. The Israelites walked across on dry land. When they got to the other side, the Egyptians tried to cross. As you know the story, the water came down on them and drowned all the Egyptians. The same God that Moses served is the same God we serve today. If you feel like you're trapped, you feel like the world's caving in, you pray to God. He will deliver you as well. Hebrews 2:14 and 15 says that God will destroy the devil and deliver all those who through fear of death were subject to lifelong slavery. The psalmist says in 56:13, you have delivered my soul from death, yes, my feet from falling, that I may walk before God in the light of life. Colossians 1:13 says, God has delivered us from the domain of darkness and transferred us to the kingdom of his beloved Son, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins. In Romans 7:24-25, Paul says, wretched man that I am, who will deliver me from this body of death? Thanks be to God through Jesus Christ our Lord. God delivered the Israelites. He will deliver you. One of my favorite lines in the song, Mary, Did You Know, is when the angel says to Mary, the baby you'll deliver will soon deliver you. We are on a wilderness journey. I don't know where you are on this journey. I don't know if you're at the happiest time of your life. I don't know if you're maybe the saddest point in your life. I don't know if you're searching for something in life. But we must trust the providence of God. We must answer his call. We must endure the test, and there will be tests. And we must look at that Red Sea in front of us and know that God will deliver us too. We have salvation. We can defeat sin. And on this journey through life, we can make it to the promised land together. So I hope if you think tonight where you are in this journey, and I want you to think about God's providence, God's calling, God's test, and God's deliverance. There's nothing greater that we're going to experience is heaven one day. No matter what we have in store in this life, any difficulties, any trials, any tribulations, I promise you, as the song we sing, it will be worth it all. If you have any need tonight, if you're not a Christian, the journey's not over. You still have time. If you're a child of God and you're struggling with things along this way in the journey, we'd like to pray for you tonight and help you any way we can. So please come now while we stand, while we sing.